Alrighty, what's going on, guys? Professor Kerr back with a part 2 to our chapter 1 series. I know we left off with neuromuscular junction and we are talking about the outer motor neuron and action potential, so we're just going to pick it up from right there. Keep in mind that these videos are just an overview in regards to the concepts that we cover in the class and such. We're not going to cover the details and everything, but I really want you just to understand the broad ideas. And you can figure out the details and look through the book and textbooks and other resources as you so choose. So really focus on this first portion up here for me. Don't really pay too much attention to this bottom part. We'll get to that in a second. But we're talking about the action potential, how it travels from the alpha motor neuron down the axon to the neuromuscular junction. Now, once it gets this neuromuscular junction, there are a few things that have to happen before it can actually reach these muscle fibers. So here we have the neuromuscular junction. This is a zoomed in version. We got the neuromuscular junction. The action potential has arrived. Now, once it arrives, this neurotransmitter called acetylcholine can be released, which is going to essentially carry the action potential in a different form. All right. So once that acetylcholine is released, it travels to this thing called the plasma lemma. Now, the plasma lemma is just a relay center. There's nothing super vital that you need to know about the plasma lemma, except for the fact that it just carries this impulse forward. Now, if we're looking down here, we still have the plasma lemma. These are the same. We have the plasma lemma again. And from the plasma lemma, we then have this impulse, this action potential, now arrives at this thing called the T tubules on the muscle fibers. So now we're really getting into the muscles now. We're kind of made it out the neuromuscular junction. Now we're kind of making it inside of the muscle. So from the T tubules, then we have this neurotransmitter, this impulse, this action potential, and then travels to this thing called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now this is probably the most vital portion of initiating this muscle contraction, because that's what we're trying to do through this whole process. We're trying to control our skeletal muscle. Now once it reaches the sarcoplasmic reticulum, once it reaches the end of the cell, which is this part right here, it then releases calcium. Now, the reason this calcium is important because this calcium is going to allow us to access the fibers that we need to utilize in order to voluntarily control our muscle. So what that looks like is calcium is going to bind to these things called troponin. Now, once it binds to troponin, what happens is troponin can essentially flip over and expose this thing called tropomyosin. Now, once tropomyosin is exposed, this allows for this interaction between these two muscular protein to interact. There's two proteins, and one's called actin and one's called myosin. And you can look at those in your textbook to see what they look like exactly. But essentially, calcium binds to troponin, and the troponin then flips over from tropomyosin, and actin and myosin can then interact in order to conduct or fulfill actual muscle contraction. So from here, that is all that you'll need to know for the actual muscle contraction, how it's initiated, how it's propagated.